This Boeing 737 had just taken off for 15 minutes when suddenly a gunshot rang out in the cabin, breaking the initial tranquility. A man slowly stood up, holding a gun with wires wrapped around his chest and something looking like a bomb. His eyes. Approaching madness, he shouted that he was going to blow up the entire plane. Passengers immediately fell into panic, with screams everywhere. In the cockpit, after learning of the situation, the crew quickly entered the global hijacking identification code 7500. After the military received the news, special forces were swiftly mobilized, and the Air Force Base also went into combat readiness. But no one expected that this hijacking incident would occur at the highly secure Dhaka International Airport. So today we will reconstruct this shocking hijacking. The Biman Bangladesh Airlines Flight 147 incident. At Dhaka Shah Jalal International Airport, on Sunday, February 24, 2019, a Biman Bangladesh Airlines plane operating flight, BG-147, was undergoing final pre-flight checks. Its destination was Dubai International Airport in the United Arab Emirates, with a stopover at Chittagong Shah Amanat Airport. However, it was this connecting flight segment that happened to become the beginning of a nightmare. This was a Boeing 737-800 aircraft with only 3 years of service, carrying 133 passengers and 14 crew members on board. Captain Jerome Shafi and First Officer Munir Masin, both with extensive flying experience, were conducting pre-flight checks. Meanwhile, passengers began passing through security, preparing to board the plane. However, one man dressed in black, wearing a hat, appeared nervous, constantly scanning the surroundings. But this did not attract the attention of the security personnel's notic, meaning he carried a deadly weapon and openly boarded Flight 147. So where did the problem arise? Upon analysis afterward, it was believed that since it was during the evening peak hours with massive crowds, the security check process was extremely tense. Along with the usual routine, many checks might have been done perfunctorily or even directly let through. After passing through the X-ray inspection room, similarly, the machine did not alarm, nor did it trigger a manual review, which became the most fatal loophole of the entire event. At 5:13 in the afternoon local time, after everything was ready, the crew received permission to take off. Soon, Flight 147 smoothly took off into the sunset. If all went well, they would land at Chittagong's Shah Amanat Airport 40 minutes later. 15 minutes later, the Boeing 737 climbed to an altitude of 15,000 feet. Just as the captain was preparing to contact the control tower to request further climbing, a roar suddenly shattered the previous calm. In the business class, the man in black suddenly stood up, pulled out a gun and fired at the ceiling. "Nobody move. If anyone stands up, I'll shoot them dead." His voice was sharp and frantic, and the passengers who were originally screaming in terror went silent. Moreover, the flight attendants' faces were filled with fear. Immediately after, the man turned and dashed toward the cockpit, pounding on the door while loudly demanding it be opened. Seeing no response, he stepped back a few paces and fired 3 shots at the door handle, attempting to forcibly break in. At this moment, another passenger in business class noticed that some red wires were exposed from the hijacker's clothing. Instinctively, with a trembling voice, he shouted, "There's a bomb! He has a bomb on him!" Subsequently, the terrifying atmosphere spread throughout the cabin again. No one would have thought that a hijacking could still occur in the year 2019. The hijacker immediately turned around and shouted angrily, "Ha! Shut up or I'll shoot and kill you first." Then the gun was pointed at all the passengers. I believe everyone felt hopeless at that moment. Some cried softly, while others prayed silently. This was not a movie. It was the living, real terror happening in the sky. At this moment, the Boeing 737, carrying 147 people, was suddenly hijacked at an altitude of 15,000 feet. Just as the hijacker was roaring madly, the flight attendants risked pressing the emergency call button, intending to alert the crew to the danger. In the critical moment, the captain and the co-pilot didn't speak, but after exchanging a glance, they immediately pulled up the cabin's surveillance. In the footage, a man was approaching the cockpit with a gun. The wires faintly exposed on his body suggest he may be carrying an explosive device. The captain reacted quickly, sealing the cabin door immediately. This way, no matter how skilled the hijacker is, he cannot open it. This is a crucial step. The events of September 11th, 2001 completely rewrote global civil aviation security regulations, especially with the revolutionary upgrade. The new generation cockpit doors are by no means simple partitions. They are designed to be impenetrable airborne fortresses. The doors are made from multi-layer composite materials, with their thickness and structural strength subjected to extreme calculations and testing, aimed at withstanding threats, including small firearms and axes, hits, hammer strikes, and even the impact of a small amount of explosives detonating at close range. The design standards are stringent, aimed at one target. Any attempt at external violent intrusion during flight should be in vain. The captain did not hesitate at all. His fingers quickly typed in the 4-digit hijack code 7500 exclusive to the aviation sector. Note that he wouldn't trigger an alarm, but instead silently synced this status via the radar system to the control tower and the air traffic control system. At 5:33 in the afternoon local time, Dhaka Air Traffic Control received a hijacking signal from Bangladesh Airlines Flight 147. The National Emergency Response Procedure was immediately activated, and the control tower promptly contacted the military, the Aviation Security Bureau, and Special Forces simultaneously. Stand by. All arriving and departing flights are urgently rerouted to clear a lifeline for Flight 147. Meanwhile, the hijacker became increasingly agitated. Failing to break down the cabin door, he pulled up a male flight attendant, placed the gun to his forehead, and shouted angrily, "If anyone dares to move, I'll kill him immediately." 2 minutes later, the Bangladesh Air Force Deputy Chief of Staff personally arrived at the control tower to begin high-altitude negotiations with the hijacker. All conditions can be discussed, but hostages' safety must be guaranteed. However, at this moment, the hijacker started exhibiting abnormal behavior for some reason. While threatening with a gun, he appeared flustered, anxious, and clearly lacked control, not at all like a well-trained terrorist. Molecule instead, it seemed like a desperate gamble, driven by some extreme emotion. The Air Force Deputy Chief of Staff keenly noticed this immediately, ordered an accelerated descent, changing to land at Shah Amanat Airport in Chittagong. Additionally, given the tense situation in Bangladesh at the time, many began to suspect that this hijacking was not merely a loss of control due to emotions, but rather a carefully chosen political action. Soon after, Flight 147 began approaching the airspace near the destination airport. The tension in the cabin remained high, and every second was a standoff, with each action potentially being a decisive strike. Flawless. The captain began descending altitude and entering the approach procedure, with silent tension filling the cockpit. The captain needed a perfect landing more than ever before, as any deviation, especially a hard landing, could be seen by the hijackers as a signal of losing control, leading to disastrous consequences. At the same time, Deputy Chief of Staff continued to negotiate with the hijackers, diverting their attention while instructing the intelligence team to immediately conduct an identity investigation. At 5:39, Flight 147 pierced through the clouds and slowly approached the runway as the entire airport was on high alert. 2 minutes later, under the captain's control, the plane landed smoothly. The flight originally planned for 40 minutes landed 12 minutes early. The difference is, this time there was no applause, only the echo of nervous heartbeats. The two pilots looked grave and did not feel any relief from landing the plane, because the real storm had just begun. Although the hijacked Boeing 737 had landed safely, the cabin door was still tightly shut, and the crisis was not yet over. The man in black was still holding a male flight attendant at gunpoint. The Bangladeshi security forces contacted the hijacker again, trying to ease the current tension and prolong the negotiation time as much as possible. After several rounds of negotiation, the hijackers finally agreed to release the other passengers and crew members. At the captain's command, everyone began to orderly evacuate through the emergency exit. On one side is a tense standoff inside the cabin, and on the other is the race against time to evacuate outside, with each step taken as if walking on thin ice. Around 6 in the evening, the special forces received orders and quickly arrived at the airport to stand by. Major General Rahman personally took command, adjusted the tactical deployment, and sealed off the perimeter of the airport. The control tower continued to engage in communication with the hijacker through the Air Force Deputy Chief of Staff, stalling for time to create conditions for an assault. During the subsequent negotiations, the hijacker only expressed a vague demand. He wished to speak with the Prime Minister, citing reasons related to his wife. Other than that, no further details were disclosed. At 7:05 in the evening, the hijacker finally released the last male flight attendant, leaving only himself on the aircraft. The special forces have completed an all-round deployment for the assault and are ready to act at any moment. At 7:17, with the command given, the operation officially began. Special Forces team members broke open the door in groups, forcibly entering the cabin. They shouted loudly, demanding the hijacker immediately drop his weapon and surrender. But the hijacker refused to cooperate and was extremely agitated. At the same time, the military technical team finally confirmed that the explosive device he was wearing was fake. After receiving this message, the Special Forces team sternly warned the hijacker again to chin up.
Surrender quickly.
However, unexpectedly, the other party tried to shoot back. Almost in an instant, the Special Forces decisively opened fire, and within a few seconds, dozens of bullets poured into the hijacker. At 7:25, just 8 minutes after the operation began, the assault was successfully completed. The hijacker was then taken to the hospital for emergency treatment, but ultimately succumbed to his injuries. At 8 o'clock local time in the evening, the airport resumed full operations, and after inspection, the aircraft in question was found to have no real-time damage. The police also immediately identified the hijacker. He is Polash Ahmed from Narayanganj. It is noteworthy that he was investigated several years ago for allegedly being involved in a criminal case. The reason why he hijacked the plane remains a mystery. Some said he has an abnormal psychological state, possibly exhibiting paranoia. Secondly, he was once married to an actress, but later, for unknown reasons, they divorced. Some analyses suggest that he might want to return to the public eye through shocking actions. Even more shocking is that the pistol he held was a homemade weapon. But the final investigation report does not describe how he took OG. The successful boarding, despite multiple security checks, also became one of the biggest questions in the incident. The military immediately released a report stating that no passengers or crew were injured during the entire incident, and the crew demonstrated calmness,
swift and professional conduct, which bought valuable time for resolving the crisis. The negotiation delay tactics employed by the Deputy Chief of Staff of the Air Force also provided the Special Forces raid provided an opportunity. In response to public doubts about the security screening system, the Civil Aviation Administration immediately responded, stating that it will thoroughly investigate safety loopholes and examine whether there are issues such as equipment aging, personnel operation oversights, or process laxity.
Incident also well examined during peak times.
Mechanisms for managing the flow of people during peak periods will also be reviewed to prevent similar incidents from happening again. Although this hijacking incident did not cause any casualties, it once again sounded the alarm for the civil aviation industry.
Peaceful year.
Iterations airport hang.
In the class, once the security mechanism is breached, it will cause multiple chain reactions. Therefore, no matter how small the oversight,
Could also become a potential breakthrough.
this incident not only is a test of the global aviation safety response capability, and also a full chain stress test of the security system, the Bangladesh authorities subsequently released a statement pledging a comprehensive upgrade of aviation security policies, improving security measures, strengthening employee training, and enhancing the ability to identify potential abnormal behaviors to solidify the last line of defense for civil aviation safety. Looking back at that crisis moment, from the crew's calm response to the Special Forces' decisive action, the hijacking incident of Bangladesh Airlines Flight 147 was not just a security storm, but also a warning light attracting national attention. It reminds us not to relax our vigilance behind the calm. Security assurance always requires the highest standards.